a true 10-bit panel, but turns out it was just an 8-bit panel emulating 10-bit. And you kind of start to see why the S26 Ultra might feel like it's starting to fall behind. But here's where the conversation gets a little bit messy, because your experience of using a phone doesn't wash down to just specs. And the truth is, anyone can throw a whole bunch of
in the US. With this design and build, again, something that we're really used to. And in the past 5 months, it's held up really well. Granted, I do use cases for my devices, especially when I'm outdoors. Like
the Ultra lineup in some ways, but specs don't always reflect real-world use. After using this phone myself for the last 10 days or so, a lot of what's in here I found to be quite surprising in both good and bad way.
Which I'll cover in this video because you guys watched me for my honesty and not a sponsored glaze fest. And by the way, I think this phone is currently on at least one of its biggest sales because you can get it right now for $200.
Hasn't really changed on this device. It feels and looks the same. Feels a little bit more comfortable with around the edges, less sharp note-like, but really nice. Now you do have the S Pen, as I mentioned, the Note. And this is one of the best features that this...
Like, you have to make sure you insert the S Pen in one specific way, or the end part of the S Pen kind of like sticks out like a sore thumb. So just something to keep in mind. Display quality.
Samsung made the corners a little rounder this year, which makes it slightly more comfortable to hold caseless, although you do still have sharp edges, which some folks may or may not like. But outside that, the camera system is housed within a new pill shape.
Before I got the phone, because look, we still have the same 5,000 milliamp hour battery that we've had on Samsung flagship phones for what, like 5 years now, I think. So I was a bit worried, but they...
This was an 8-bit panel. Some of them started acting like the display suddenly became terrible overnight, and that's just not the reality. Most normal people are not going to look at this display and say, wow, I can't believe that this is an 8-bit display, not 8.
Now, what about the privacy display? Well, I was wrong about this. So in my first review of the S26 Ultra, I mentioned the privacy display, and I also talked about how good it can be in places like movie theaters.
Have I looked at this display and thought, wow, it's not bright enough, or gosh darn it, I wish it was a little bit sharper. If it wasn't for that privacy display, this would have been amazing. Stop worrying about it. The display on the S26 Ultra is perfectly,
but from her point of view, the screen's dark. So it doesn't bother her at all. But what about the complaints of the privacy display? So with the S26 Ultra, yeah, you do lose a little.
But occasionally suffer from things like banding over gradients. Samsung has done something different this year where that doesn't seem to happen at all this gen, and the image and the color are great. I've watched my fair share of content on here.
This is exactly the kind of direction that phones and AI should be going. All right, now let's talk about the next controversial topic when it comes to the Galaxy S26 Ultra, and that is the cameras. Because again, there are companies out there, specifically international
air coating, that cuts reflectivity to under 0.8%, which is 5 times less than a standard display. If you want to check out either of those, I will link them in the description, but let's get into what is arguably
is obvious. As someone who actually likes to use their phone without a case, because I actually like the slim feeling of the phone, I like how these phones look, I like to see the color that I bought, the consequences of not using a case are definitely there.
Entire privacy mode for this display. But watching games, FIFA, right? But watching content, YouTube videos, MCU, which I'm currently...
is going to cover almost any realistic scenario in terms of water and dust resistance. The S26 Ultra screen also retains the same Corning Gorilla Armor 2 glass as last year, which gives you decent scratch...
Because my S25 Ultra, which is now over a year old, does get hotter than the S26 Ultra. And by the way, just holding these in my hand, the S26 Ultra just feels so much more
passcodes or things like that. So that's cool, right? We've got pseudo, MagSafe features here, which is a bit of a bummer. But of course, if you want to see some things like
iPhone, which is great. I don't miss iMessage on here. I don't really have too much of the whole blue bubble, green bubble issues. because I also do have an iPhone. But this being my personal device, Android,
1.4 aperture it's not just a low light thing, it's a depth of field thing. I didn't realize this until I was shooting product shots for the channel. You get real natural background blur now. With
later I can just add it there real quick on the spot and I'm all set to go. It's coming really useful. I hope Samsung does keep the S Pen. Now there is also the battery life. In the past 5 months, even though we have this
paper, Samsung does look behind. But what I would say to those consumers is that the battery conversation should not stop at capacity. Battery life is not only about the size of the cell, it also comes down to the processor, the display
for this phone, which is why you see it slightly edge out other phones like the OnePlus 15 in benchmarks that have the same chip. That being said, even with it having roughly 12 to 16% better scores in Geekbench,
well, 5 months ago at this point. So we still have to see how it performs in the next 6 years and 7 months. But with their past devices, like a year, 2 years, predecessors, they're
degrees and your image stays locked on with virtually no movement. Obviously, that particular use case is kind of gimmicky, but the real benefit of this is you get amazing video stabilization. If you've got an
But that's just where Samsung is. There are 3 other devices we're comparing it to, and those devices are the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, the Oppo Find X9 Ultra, and the Vivo.
Absolutely useful. And it's reliable. Like, it's still blurry, I get it, but compared to previous years, it is very legible and readable. It just works.
You're not shooting within any social media apps, because let's not talk about social media optimization for Android, it's just still not there. But as long as you are shooting in the native camera app, and especially when it comes to the videos, the S26 Ultra is finally
the Galaxy S26 Ultra and the Xiaomi 17 Ultra. All right, let's see who does better with video, lighting, spacing, and audio.
phone down on a flat surface. I love that Google added that to the Pixel 10, and I wish we would see that here at some point, but it's not a huge deal. Speaking of wireless, one of the quieter updates on the S26
Formula 1 races, and then have it add to your calendars and set a 1-hour reminder before it starts, and it will do all that. It will access all of your applications and set everything up for you. And then we have Gemini Live, which has been absolutely
or overlapping AI systems between Galaxy AI, Bixby, Gemini, and Perplexity, where some like Perplexity and Bixby have system-level access to apps and settings, and Gemini can do things like book.
Once on my kitchen tile, 0 damage. I mean, honestly, it's shocking that there is nothing, literally nothing visible on this phone. Not a single scratch on the back glass.
Contrast and some really good looks. The Leica quality on here on the Xiaomi really stands out and gives you something different. But this is something that, if I were to quantify, is, I think.
All right, now let's talk about Galaxy AI, because this is one of those areas where people instantly roll their eyes. They don't want to hear about it, and I understand why. AI has been completely shoved down our throats for the last 3 to 4 years by every single company out there. It seems like
the S Pen thing where you have to insert it in one direction, because if you don't, it's gonna look like this. It just looks a bit funky, and it looks like it doesn't really belong there. Yeah, it only goes
like each other. So if you're not like me, then this will be a reliable device for you. But just to kind of wrap things up, this device I can still easily